But you're not factoring in the southern states' overwhelming poorness, which has been a huge bonding mechanism across races in order to survive for many years. Well, I'd like to address that, but first, my name's Andrew. I lived in Texas for 25 years. I have ancestry that goes back to Louisiana in the 1860s and Virginia in the 1760s as well. And here's what I have to say to that. The thing is that the conditions that created that economic disparity, that poverty in the South, does originate from slavery, and here's why. The main thing that I want to address first is that when it comes to discussing American history, it's almost impossible to avoid the subject of slavery. Slavery was a major economic factor in the United States. It made so much money, and to avoid that is like trying to avoid speaking about oil today, when so much of American politics has been motivated by oil and gas interests. Second thing that I want to say is that when it comes to the effects of slavery, they do still persist to this day, whether you like it or not. The descendants of slaves are, many of them, still living in the exact same places that their ancestors did. The descendants of slave owners, many of them still are holding on to wealth that was given to them by their ancestors. That's just how it works in history. You can find this all over the world, not just in the United States. Having said that, the reason why the South is doing so much worse economically than the North in the United States is because they fell behind. They fell behind because of slavery. And the thing about slavery is that when you enslave people, it discourages you from improving. Because when you own enslaved people, you need to make sure that they are always tired and that they don't get any ideas so they don't revolt against you, which means that they have to do a lot of busy work. And when you do busy work, this discourages industrialization, because the North industrialized a lot quicker than the South did. For that reason, the South fell behind economically. Another issue with industrialization is that it requires you to do more intricate work, which means that you need to train and educate the people doing it. And for that reason, a lot of slave owners did not want to industrialize because they would have to educate the people that they're enslaving, which would then make it more likely for them to get ideas and to eventually seek self-actualization. And the other thing is that for the slave owners themselves, they weren't encouraged to improve either, because many of them were simply holding on to the money that they had, and unfortunately, owning enslaved people isn't necessarily an asset that can really last unless you have the institution of slavery. So the slave-owning states essentially put all of their eggs in one basket, into slavery, and they believed in King Cotton. They believed that by using cotton diplomacy, they could get what they wanted. And when Lincoln was elected president, they became concerned that he would push for abolition, so they seceded, and they hoped that by using cotton as leverage, they would be able to legitimize and establish their own economy, which didn't work. Other countries didn't want to trade with a slave-owning state, and so they instead divested to countries such as Brazil, India, and certain parts of Central Asia. There's other factors at play too. For instance, the Confederacy was very poor at logistics, but the main thing I'm trying to say is that the South was dealing with the effects of the Civil War, which was created due to the situation regarding slavery, which was my original point. The other thing to understand is that there have been multiple efforts to undo the damage that was being done in the South, to push it in the right direction, and then those efforts became undone, like in the 1920s, and then those efforts became done again in the 1950s and 60s, and so on and so on. So there is this frustrating tug and pull where a lot of work is being done in order to improve things in the South, and then it can be undone again by someone else who is acting maliciously. It is a complicated subject that does require a lot of nuance, but the important thing to understand is that we are still dealing with the effects of slavery today in the United States. It's not something that we can avoid. It's something that is there, and we have to address it if we want to move towards a better future.